Welcome to the World Forest Report. I am Dean Bell, and here is Dean Kevin from the UK. Today I'll be sharing about the state of the trees. Actually, this is an older report from 2020. I know we're ending here. It's December 21st, 2021. I couldn't find a report on the 2021, but there's a report here that from 2020 that's very, very well done. I thought just to overview of the forest fires and the trees and all that I think it's worth going over. It's probably pretty similar to 2021, except 2021 is worse, you know, it's getting worse, the situation. But let me share this with you. This is from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. What is forest biological diversity? Forest biological diversity refers to all life forms found within forested areas and the ecological roles they perform. It encompasses not only trees, but the multitude of plants, animals, and microorganisms that inhabit forest areas and their associated genetic diversity. Forest biological diversity can be considered at different levels, including ecosystem, landscape, species, population, and genetic. Complex interactions can occur within and between these levels. This complexity allows organisms to adapt to continually changing environmental conditions and to maintain ecosystem functions. Status and trends in forest area. Forest ecosystems are a critical component of the world's biodiversity, as many forests are more biodiverse than other ecosystems. Forests cover 31% of the global land area. Approximately half the forest area is relatively intact, and more than 1/3 is primary forest, i.e. naturally regenerated forests of native species where there are no visible indications of human activities and the ecological processes that are not significantly disturbed. The total forest area is 4.06 billion hectares, or approximately 5,000 meters per person. But forests are not equally distributed among the globe. More than half of the world's forests are found in only 5 countries: the Russian Federation, Brazil, Canada, the United States of America, and China. And 2/3, 66% of the forests are found in 10 countries. Here's a graph of the 10 countries. Other countries are Australia, Congo, Indonesia, Peru, India, and the rest of the world. Deforestation and forest degradation continue to take place at alarming rates, which contributes significantly to the ongoing loss of biodiversity. Since 1990, it is estimated that 420 million hectares of forests have been lost through conversion to other land uses. Although the rate of deforestation has decreased over the past 3 decades. Between 2015 and 2020, the rate of deforestation was estimated at 10 million hectares per year, down from 16 million hectares per year in the 1990s. The area of primary forest worldwide has decreased by over 80 million hectares since 1990. Agricultural expansion continues to be the main driver of deforestation and forest degradation. and the associated loss of forest biodiversity. Remember, this is from the UN. So they have their slant on things. Large-scale commercial agriculture, primarily cattle ranching and cultivation of soybean and oil palm, accounted for 40% of tropical deforestation between 2000 and 2010, and local subsistence agriculture for another 33%. Forest species and generic diversity. It is not only the trees that make the forest, but the many different species of plants and animals that reside in the soil, understory, and canopy. Estimates of the total number of species on Earth range from 3 million to 100 million. Although it is widely reported that forests harbor 80% of terrestrial plants and animals, such as precise estimate is unlikely to be accurate given the changing state of knowledge of planetary biodiversity. While trees are the defining component of forests and their diversity can give an indication of overall diversity, there are many other ways to determine the biodiversity significance of forests. Forest species diversity, trees. 60,082, Global Tree Search Database reports the existence of 60,082 tree species. Nearly half of all tree species, 45%, are members of just 10 families. Nearly 58% of all tree species are single country endemics. As of December 2019, a total of 20,334 tree species had been included in the UCN Red List of Threatened Species, of which 8,056 were assessed as globally threatened, critically endangered or endangered or vulnerable. More than 1,400 tree species are assessed as critically endangered and in urgent need of conservation action. Here's a list of the 10 countries with the most tree species. We have Brazil at the top, then Colombia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Venezuela, China, Peru, Ecuador, Mexico, and Madagascar. Forest species diversity, other forest plants, animals, and fungi. Plants. About 391,000 species of vascular plants are known to science, of which about 94% are flowering plants. Of these, 21% are likely threatened by extinction. Some 60% of the total are found in tropical forests. Fungi. Some 144,000 species of fungi have been named and classified so far. However, it is estimated that the vast majority, over 93%, of fungal species are currently unknown to science, indicating that the total number of fungi species on Earth is somewhere between 2.2 and 3.8 million. Vertebrate species. Close to 70,000 vertebrate species are known and described. Of these, forests provide habitats for almost 5,000 amphibian, close to 7,500 bird species, and 3,700 different mammals. Invertebrate species. Some 1.3 million species of invertebrates have been described. However, many more exist, with some estimates ranging from 5 million to 10 million. Most are insects, and the vast majority live in forests. The interconnected roles of forest plants, animals, and fungi. Soil microbes Forest-dependent pollinators, insects, bats, birds, and some mammals, and saprophytic beetles play very important parts in maintaining the biodiversity and ecosystem functions of forests. Similarly, mammals, birds, and other organisms can play major roles in forest ecosystem structure, including on the distribution patterns of trees, through their direct roles in seed dispersal, seed predation, and herbivory, and indirectly through predation on such ecological architects. Along tropical coasts, mangroves provide breeding grounds and nurseries for numerous species of fish and shellfish, and help trap sediments that might otherwise adversely affect seagrass beds and coral reefs, the habitats of myriad of marine species. People of biodiversity in forests. Much of human society today has at least some interaction with forests and the biodiversity they contain, and all people benefit from the functions provided by components of this biodiversity in the carbon, water, and nutrient cycles, and through the links with food production. Let's examine the benefits that people derive from forests in terms of livelihoods, food security, and human health. In both low and high income countries, and in all climatic zones, communities that live within forests rely the most directly on forest biodiversity for their lives and livelihoods, using products derived from forest resources for food, fodder, shelter, energy, medicine, and income. 86 million forests provide more than 86 million green jobs and support the livelihoods of many more. An estimated 880 million people spend part of their time collecting fuel wood or producing charcoal. Of the people living in extreme poverty, over 90% are dependent on forests for at least part of their livelihood. Rural people often participate in the value chains of forest biodiversity. For example, by collecting wood and non-wood products from nearby forests for personal use or sale, or engaging in forest product industries or value addition. Non-consumptive uses of forest biodiversity, such as recreation and tourism, are also a growing part of rural cash economics or economies. Each year, an estimated 8 billion visits are made to protected areas, many of which are forest covered. Indigenous peoples depend to a high degree on forest biodiversity for their livelihoods, although this relation is in flux as their linkages with national and global monetary economies grow. Areas managed by indigenous peoples, approximately 28% of the world's land surface, include some of the most ecologically intact forests and many hotspots of biodiversity. Conservation and a sustainable use of forests and forest biodiversity. There are ways to manage the world's forest ecosystems that will ensure the conservation and sustainable use of their biodiversity. Creation of protected areas has historically been the forest governance instrument most often adopted to pursue biodiversity objectives. This approach has achieved positive results in terms of conserving species and establishing barriers to the progress of deforestation. Natural reserves alone are not sufficient to conserve biodiversity. They are usually too small, create barriers to species migration, and are vulnerable to factors such as climate change. Additionally, protected areas contain only a fraction of existing forest biodiversity. This means that there is a need to look beyond protected areas and to stream biodiversity conservation into the forest management practices. I'm not going to go on any further, but the article continues. Professor, I'm reading here, this is a report, forest report from 2020, talking about state of the world's forests. And it's put out by the United Nations, which, if you're aware, they have an agenda to actually with Agenda 2030 to destroy, the Earth with their carbon, carbon credits and all the things. They're trying to get rid of the CO2, which would kill organic life on the planet. So that's part of their agenda. But I thought I'd read this anyway and see what they're up to and see. This is all sound good kind of words that they're talking about, sound good ideas. But the world is getting worse. Forests are being purposely set on fire to destroy the oxygen that we breathe. And they're doing climate change or climate conferences, etc., to pretend that they're doing something, but in the meanwhile, they're doing nothing. And in the meanwhile, also blaming us for the cause of the fires and the carnage, with the organic life forms. I just want to mention two more examples how they blame us. I think I mentioned this before. There's 2 fires in Shasta or the Northern California area where one fire was blamed on a father who's an electrician and his son that were camping. They actually reported the fire, they called 911. They tried to help other campers get away. They were blamed for the fire. They're under investigation. The bail set on them, they're accused of setting the fire. They're patsies, and that's what they do. They point the finger at somebody, and then that's how their agenda is. And then another one, also Northern California fire, where they blamed a young woman who was supposedly unfit to stand trial. They put her in a mental hospital. That they blamed her, easy victim. They blamed her for setting a fire that caused, thousands of acres burned up because of her. And there's no mention of directed energy weapons anywhere. It's always climate change. It's always, poor management of the forests. We don't burn enough, the undergrowth. I heard somewhere they still blame, it's 80 or 90%, at least 80% of the fires on humans, which is true. Humans are shooting directed energy weapons out of planes, starting the fires. So it's actually true. Yeah. So, but reading that, the public just says, "Oh yeah, it's careless campers," And in the meantime, they're going to say, "Well, you can't go out in nature anymore." That's part of the 2030 agenda, where they're going to restrict some natural areas, and the guys are protecting the areas, and will be moved to the cities and have to deal with 5G and all the restrictions. So that's my share today. Any comments before we go on? Go ahead.
Thanks, Val. Appreciate it. I'm, that's the gloomy, loomy, doomy report. Part 1. It could be worse. However, I am reminded of my movements to the California West Coast in the 70s. Then 80s, I went to Hawaii. 90s, Arizona, Texas. And all the time looking for places that weren't that one could reside, where one wasn't in this city atmosphere or dominated prison planet controlled nature atmosphere. So today I was wondering, you know, I noticed my progression. Now I'm in Florida, same kind of thing. So I definitely had that personal experience, but here I am, you know, Mr. Alien looking through the viewfinder and noticing or aware of how we're being watched. And at the same time that everything we're doing or you're doing here is actually observed by the entire universe. And not in the derogatory sense, but in the whole sense of not informational directly. It may not be recognized, it may not be watched. Nonetheless, it's real and valuable at the highest level and universally, spiritually, physically, through all the realms. So I'm very appreciative of that, and sharing alongside that is this, well, just to add one more thing in the environmental field, I've seen recently an article about, well, part of it was looking up fluoride and the fluoridated water situation that began with Cedar Rapids, Michigan, where they used certain criteria to supposedly be protecting children's teeth from cavities to implement the fluoridation of water, which is actually a destructive chemical process, but it would get rid of, partially through the destructive chemical, of the appearance of cavities. That is a brown stain. And so they call that the brown stain situation, I think. And that led me to reading about the, well, there's three of them. There's the chloride, and then there's the carbon. Again, which side of those things are actually all negative? It's hard to say. It's all very convoluted. And I've realized that everything we get is always hearsay, second nature, after the fact. This includes these movies that we make or have seen made about the environmental crisis, dangers. We actually haven't seen one about Fukushima, is that right? And Japan really hasn't come out with a movie about that yet. And the actual spread of the radiated water, which isn't just centered in the nuclear plant. As a matter of fact, I read also about in Colorado, there's a guy who was a so-called, you know, kind of hippie sympathizer, who now says that, and the hippies and et cetera were the group of environmentalists trying to stop nuclear power. Now, this guy, among others, had come out with nuclear power actually is a much better answer. It's safer, what have you, and that solar energy and wind energy and other things are actually promoting more global warming and other of those issues. Solar power also being controlled by the oil industries and other corporate monopolies in order to ensure their bottom line. And they really don't care whether solar energy could be destructive. It certainly kills birds. And maybe you've covered this already, so that's another part of the entirety.
We did watch Planet of the Humans. talking about the solar energy documentary. How it makes,
Yeah,
how all these resources are used to create the solar panels. It's almost counterproductive, according to the documentary.
right. Yes. So the whole environmental condition is polluted, disproportionately imbalanced, and polarized. And they, yes, the whole government powers that be, et cetera, are using that for their defense. So they've enabled the populations to be what I call a captive audience. And I read one quote recently said, I'm not so worried about this issue of these controllers or whatever they're doing so much as all the people who are so willing to go along with it without mindlessly going along like the sheep. And more of the threat, it would be us in that sense. And
Thanks,
a
Peter.
few more thoughts, but that'll be it for now. Yeah, thanks, Val.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kevin.
The following information was sourced from the site Down to Earth and titled World's Coldest Regions Have Been on Fire in 2021, even in winter. Wildfires in 2021 mostly occurred in Siberia, North America, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. The article was written by Akshit Sangomia, published Friday the 10th of December 2021. Some of the coldest regions of the world have been on fire in 2021, some even through the winter months. Wildfires around the world emitted 1.76 billion tons of carbon in 2021 till November the 30th, according to the European Union's Copernicus Atmosphere Monitoring Service. This is the equivalent of 6.45 billion tons of carbon dioxide, and was 148% more than the total fossil fuel emissions of the European Union, according to Copernicus. The wildfires mostly occurred in Siberia, North America, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. This was the most carbon dioxide emissions from wildfires for these regions for the January to November period recorded by Copernicus since its inception in 2003. This was mainly due to dry and hot conditions in the regions, Mark Parrington, a senior scientist with Copernicus, pointed out. Globally, even though the carbon emissions from wildfires was not the maximum recorded by Copernicus, the EU agency said such emissions would increase. Wildfires in Siberia affected the western part of the region, around Omsk and Tyumen, in the early part of the year. By summer, the eastern part of the region started feeling the heat of the wildfires, especially the Sakha Republic in the northeast. August was the worst month in terms of forest fires around the world, and witnessed the highest carbon emissions from the extreme events at 0.378 billion tons. In July, the emissions were 0.343 billion tons, of which half came from North America and Siberia. These regions also experienced increased forest fire activity in April, even as colder than normal temperatures prevailed, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The July and August wildfires in North America coincided with record-breaking temperatures and heat waves, especially in Canada. The city of Lytton recorded a sizzling temperature of 49.6 degrees Celsius at the end of June that ignited a series of wildfires that went on for many days. This was the highest temperature ever recorded in Canada. The Mediterranean was also affected by wildfires during the same period, leading to an increase in the PM 2.5 levels in the region. Turkey was the most affected country, but there were fires from Tunisia in North Africa to Italy in Europe. Fires were a major concern in India too this year. Copernicus highlighted the seasonal stubble burning in northwest India as the major causes of fires in October and November. Neighbouring Pakistan also witnessed an increase in fire activity. This increased the particulate matter pollution across the Indo-Gangetic plains from Pakistan till Bangladesh. Earlier, Odisha had reported 51,968 forest fires from November 2020 to June 2021, the highest in India for the period, as told to Parliament by Bhupender Yadav, Union Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change. A total of 345,989 forest fires were recorded across the country. The other states with huge losses due to forest fires were Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, Uttarakhand, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Mizoram, Assam, and Manipur. Forest fires had ravaged Uttarakhand in the early part of the year. The fires had been going on continuously for 6 months. There were 989 fire incidents in the forests of the state, which would have ignited multiple forest fires from October the 1st, 2020 to April the 4th, 2021. according to Forest Department figures. Some 1,297.43 hectares of forest got burned down in the fires, as per estimates. The important thing to note here is that Uttarakhand is a mountain state, and the fires were burning through the entire winter season. The current outlook for the winter season, released by the India Meteorological Department for the state, also does not look promising, as temperatures are going to be higher than normal. That was the end of that article, and it gives a brief overview of the fires that have been occurring in recent times, including fires that have been ravaging through India. As you can see, at every given opportunity, they will mention climate change as being the cause, and also all the carbon dioxide that is emitted when the trees do burn. They also mention as being detrimentally impacting to the environment. And although the burning of the forests is obviously a bad thing, the carbon dioxide that is emitted from them is not necessarily so, because the carbon dioxide is obviously what the plants and all the everything naturally occurring trees and such breathe in. And so this is their double-pronged attack, I suppose. That is all based on climate change, and if they can get that to stick, they can completely remodel human society and every aspect and facet of it in response to a situation that really isn't an issue, because climate changes all the time. And of course, then on top of that, at every opportunity, they're demonizing carbon dioxide with their ambition and endeavor to want to hit net zero, as they call it. And if you have net zero carbon dioxide, there can be nothing living on the planet, because if there's no carbon dioxide, there's nothing the plants and trees are breathing in, and therefore there's no oxygen being produced by them, and therefore anything that requires oxygen also cannot be living. And so that's the end of that article.
There's like 400 parts per million in the atmosphere of carbon dioxide approximately, and that's just barely keeping the plants alive. So if they reduce that anymore, yeah, like you say, organic life here on the planet is in extreme danger. Greenhouse growers, they even have these machines that emit CO2 for their plants to give them more. So actually, what the controllers are doing, it's almost what it's just turn around what they're saying and do the opposite. What the news media is saying, just look at it the opposite way. Everything is like turned around, everything they're doing. So it's all about control and destruction.
My point of view about the timing thing has been enlightened recently, because I've also been sensed with the position of what is now. So what I mean is, as an example, I've been predicting the lottery for 5 years plus, increasingly improving my reports, prediction, whatever. And what I found out this week was that, and I had a sense of this through the year, that the actual data that they are providing for the positions in the solar system is 1 day behind the actual day. So all the data that's being used is after the fact. And this is very similarly understood about the idea of the Big Bang. And now they are able to take pictures of the Big Bang. Recently, it's a big thing that people have been noticing. Oh, we can take pictures of the Big Bang and actually see it in action. Okay, so what? The point that they're putting out is that, this is an actual event and that the universe has actually been created, etc., and use that as a reference. But they're also pointing out is that everything else is after the fact. And it's all actually happening now in the same moment. But outside of that kind of philosophical or astronomical scientific point of view is this awareness that only the now exists. And the data that we use is always referentially dysfunctional because it's after the fact, just like the weather report or the news. It comes out, okay, we're going to tell you where this and that hurricane is going, when in fact the hurricane is already gone ahead of where they're showing, and their models are on the prediction of what has been put out the day or two or three or week before. And so they follow their prediction models until they prove to be false, because you can never actually predict exactly. And so everyone follows that weather report. Naturally, they want to know what the weather is going to be, and they're probably going to have a pretty good estimate of what the weather is going to be. But this week, as an example, the weather report that was provided didn't come out nearly like it is, because Val, I notice you're wearing warm weather gear, and here it's going to go down to 37 Fahrenheit tonight, and it's about 50 high. It's very cool. Generally for Florida, that's close to about as low as it gets. It can go lower, 5 to 10 degrees, but so we have this effect in place that everyone is constantly following, and that includes the media and the reports and the television, the movies. All of them, of course, are about so-called events that happened in the past or presentations that have been given from the past. And none of them are actually reality, of course, certainly not the movies, but the presentations are put forth, and everyone is right along with that as the sheep following the sheep holder. And that's the condition situation here. It's true with the trees and the forests as well.
The following information was sourced from the site ufoblogger.com and titled "Wood on Mars, NASA Leaked Picture." Yesterday, we received the email which talked about how NASA released a photo that they shouldn't have. In the picture, it can be seen a photo that shows a piece of timber about the size of a railroad tile. NASA claims that Mars is a desert planet with no life at all. If that was the case, from where would a piece of timber of this size come from? There are vast forests on Mars, ones that are kept hidden from the public. This piece of wood looks like it floated to its present location, being partially sunk in the soil. The ground around it is very interesting. Notice the flat rock formation of the soil and the crevices in between them. Does this look familiar? It appears to be the bed of a dried up pond. There had to be a significant amount of water in this area, water high enough to lift that railroad tie-sized piece of timber and float it perhaps several miles. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter showed that vast regions of the red planet have been altered by floods. This dried pond effect should come as no surprise. This flood had to have happened within the past 30 or 40 years, because the wood is intact, though this is judging the rate of decay by Earth standards. Some may say that Mars did have water on it long ago, and that it even had an atmosphere, which is true, but a piece of timber isn't going to survive for thousands of years. Both of the Viking orbiters filmed vast forests on Mars, though no subsequent probe to the red planet has shot a single frame of a film showing a tree. This was by design. The Viking photographs show more than just a few trees, but rather thousands upon thousands of them. These trees appear to be much larger than Earth trees, having a leaf and branch system that is unique to Mars. The foliage spans much wider than similar plants on Earth do, rising to who knows what heights. The spacing between them could be the result of the dying Martian atmosphere. Dense forests, more than likely, filled large areas of Mars back in the days when it had a breathable environment. There were undoubtedly several species of trees and different varieties of underbrush, which are now extinct. The flood destroyed the Garden of Eden and other ancient worlds that were wanted to be destroyed, such as Atlantis. The ancient Egyptians spoke of a time that existed before Egypt. The Sphinx clearly shows signs of water erosion, which shows that it existed before the flood, and well before modern archaeologists claim that it did. The same wiping out strategy was applied to worlds beyond the Earth. Mars has an ancient world that was destroyed, one with a face and a pyramid. So it isn't so hard to believe that the moon did as well. Many claim that the moon isn't a moon at all, but an alien object that was placed in Earth orbit. Some have called it lunar. They claim that the moon was not mentioned in the biblical story of creation, but it was. The moon was referred to as the lesser light that rules the night in Genesis 1:16. The moon stopped in the sky in Joshua 10:30, but this had nothing to do with the alien presence there. The aliens live on the surface of the moon, but this is in no way saying that there isn't an alien presence inside the moon as well. If you take some time to use your photo editor, with high resolution photos of the moon, it won't take you long to find these structures. NASA will suggest that you created this, or that it is really part of a crater. But stop and ask yourself one question. If the moon really is as NASA claims that it is, then why are some photos classified and unavailable to the public, while others are inked and blurred? One of the most famous examples of this is the Apollo 16 Earthrise photo, in which the Earth is rising over the moon. NASA says that the object in the picture is the Earth, and few people question it. If you think for yourself and look with an open mind, you will clearly see that this is a UFO. This is another craft off to the left, which NASA doesn't even attempt to explain away. The fact that trees can survive in such an atmosphere and with much less water than Earth trees do reveals their unique structure, while offering hope for an increasingly polluted Earth. Since the Martian atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide, these plants would have to thrive on it in a way much superior to Earth trees. They may give off oxygen, though I am using terrestrial vegetation for comparison, but they could give off another gas, one even toxic to humans. Seeding or drafting these trees in bulk could bring breathable air back to the red planet. If Mars was so altered by water, then where did all that water go? Some of it went into the soil. Much of it is frozen at the poles, and a good percentage of it went into a lake. NASA didn't need to spend all that money on the Phoenix mission in order to search for water on Mars. All they had to do was look at their old photographs. The only way that piece of timber got to where it was is by way of a flood, and the only way that it separated from the tree that it was once a part of was by high and rapidly flowing water. Based on the findings of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, that piece of wood could have floated for some distance before coming to its final resting place. The lake, although frozen, Mars having a mean surface temperature of minus 46 degrees Celsius, must contain more than just water. There has to be some amoebas and other single-celled organisms in these waters. There are most likely fossils of Martian fish and perhaps even Martian animals. On Earth, old lake beds are a prime location in which to find dinosaur fossils. Why would Mars be any different? If you examine the lake carefully, especially toward the right angle, you will notice two indentations. One is large and shallow, while the other one, which is located near the right edge of the lake, is small but much deeper. These are due to the lake shifting as the result of temperature fluctuations. NASA can keep telling its lies, but the photos have slipped out. And what a story they tell. NASA thought that the Opportunity rover took a picture of the area in front of it, but did they honestly expect us to forget about the railroad-sized piece of timber in the foreground? It's time for NASA to come clean with the public. It's time that they land one of those rovers in Cydonia, the Inca city, or in one of the forests.
Yeah, just another photo came out about a water river twice as wide as the Grand Canyon, found on Mars. Someone put it out there. So there's something going on there. And NASA, of course, they, like I mentioned before, they like to confuse people. They're conflicting reports, denial. It's just part of their game to keep people confused. No straight shooters there.
They're trying to hide the bases that's up there and the technology that they've got there. Yeah, there's a lot of reason why to hide it. And that's why they always show it the desolated areas.
So that was a World Forest Report. It's December 21st, 2021. Okay, we'll see you next year. Let's see what the year brings. It's going to be a rough ride, I think, 2022. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We finish off with the NUUU. That's your connection to something that may wake you up. NUUU. Peter? Ronald?
NUUU.
And Kevin?
NUUU.